Okay, thank you very much for your introduction. I hope you can see my screen here. You never know when you're doing these things remotely. So just to introduce to our company, mHealth was founded by two respiratory consultants, myself and Professor Tom Wilkinson, who's a practicing professor at the University of Southampton. We both specialised in patients suffering with COPD, and what we realised very early on in our careers when we were tasked with overhauling services for patients with COPD in Southampton, which had around about 6,000 patients in their community, was that we could never reach everybody. And we thought it was fair to develop a platform or a system which would enable patients with all stages of disease to access specialist care. So we started by building a very simple website that gave people access to self-management instruction, inhaler videos, and a very short exercise video. And from there, we're successful in then winning a grant to commercialize that platform into the myCOPD app, which became the first NHS-approved digital platform and the one that's the only platform actually that's achieved national reimbursements for an application in the NHS in the UK. We've currently got about 41,000 registered users. When we went out to commercialize myCOPD, it became clear that the healthcare system was asking for a platform that would address multiple comorbidities. They weren't willing to purchase a system just for one disease area. So we spent a year in developing similar platforms for asthma, heart disease, type 1, type 2 diabetes, deliver cardiac rehabilitation, but also develop systems for monitoring COVID-19 during the last 12 months. We've won a variety of awards. It's a Class 1 medical device and is regulated by the MDR. And we have contracts in about 60% of the NHS England commissioning groups. We work very closely with the pharmaceutical industry and doing a lot of work currently with AstraZeneca. What we heard from our first speaker in terms of the oncology platform, Hire, we've built the system for Hire here in the UK to manage patients with oncology issues, starting with stage 3A lung cancer. And those programs begin in January next year. We're based in the seaside resort of Bournemouth, right on the south coast, and we're supported by an international investment from McKesson's. What we do know is that the treatment of COPD does need to change. Patients are certainly now in this era demanding significant innovation and different ways of accessing health service. There's limited access to pulmonary rehabilitation components, which is one of the mainstays of treatment for patients with COPD across the world. And here in the UK, probably only about 3% of patients have access to COPD, to pulmonary rehabilitation services with COPD of the severity that requires that. And pulmonary rehabilitation often is best delivered post-acute exacerbation and post-hospital admission. And that's meant to be delivered within a few weeks of discharge, and most services struggle to deliver that capacity. There's poor adherence to current treatments. We know from the amount of people that fulfill their prescriptions that only about 60% of patients draw their prescriptions from their pharmacy. And there's a lot of inhaler technique errors within this population. Approximately 30 to 40% of patients can take their medication correctly. And to have the ability to remote manage these patients at a population scale is something a clinician we desired. And we've got systems now in the NHS that are monitoring between 500 and 1,000 COPD patients at any one time to look for deterioration or manage them through their pulmonary rehabilitation service. Digital therapeutics is a new industry, but what's the difference between a digital therapeutic and a normal app that you might download from the App Store? Well, digital therapeutics have evidence of efficacy and the highest proof of evidence. They should require randomized controlled trial studies. They should be published in peer-reviewed journals. But it's not just the evidence behind them. They've also got to be delivered on high-quality software platforms that can be scaled to the size of the population that requires it to be used. And it takes about 7 years to get from an idea to get it commercialized in the industry, out into the community and used by individual patients. So it's a long lead time. So myCOPD has published evidence in 3 respected journals. The first study was the Trooper study, which investigated the non-inferiority of pulmonary rehabilitation delivered either through myCOPD or through conventional classes. And this achieved its aim. So we put 90 patients through that program, one of the biggest actually randomized controlled trial studies in pulmonary rehabilitation, which proved non-inferiority when it was delivered through the myCOPD platform. A rescue study investigated the impact of myCOPD in a patient population that was discharged from hospital, giving people access to myCOPD as opposed to conventional ways of delivering discharge bundles, reduced readmissions, accelerated the recovery of patients with exacerbations, and reduced future hospital admissions out to 12 months. And another study called the EARLY study investigated the impact of myCOPD in patients with mild and moderate disease. And what we showed in this study that we could correct around about 70% of inhaler errors just using the platform alone. We could improve people's COPD assessment tests, and we could reduce exacerbations in that population. And what we've seen here in randomized controlled trial studies has also been replicated in the real world. And we've got evidence of that, and all of this is published on our website for people to view. But the myCOPD platform is for both patients and clinicians, and what we can do with myCOPD is deliver an intervention remotely at a fraction of the cost of conventional healthcare delivery and a population scale. So here in the UK, it will cost approximately £715 for somebody to go through pulmonary rehabilitation. We charge just £40 for patients to go through the application. We deliver accredited structured education to our patients. And what digital does better than conventional ways of delivering education through class-based programs is that we can really individualize our educational courses based on the severity of disease, the medication they're taking, their exacerbation frequency, etc. We enable the remote monitoring of exacerbations, symptoms, quality of life by a clinical team, and we do that in over 100 NHS providers. We've got good evidence now we can correct between 70 and 80% of inhaler technique errors. And if we just do one thing with a platform such as this, such as improving inhaler technique errors, we've gone a long way actually in improving the quality of life and the impact of this disease, both on patients, but also on healthcare systems. And what myCOPD does is it informs patients to be able to self-manage their condition better and often independently of their clinical team. So there are many components that sit inside the myCOPD app, and we won't have time to go through them all, but I'm just going to highlight several of the really important applications that we've got here within this digital therapeutic. One thing we can do is deliver hyperlocal weather and air pollution reports, so patients are able to manage their day better. We do that in partnership with a company called Breezometer. Simple things such as a checklist, and the checklist is some things that patients need to do to make sure they're doing everything they can to manage their health, and delivers the same kind of functionality that would normally receive at an annual review, such as have you looked at your inhaler videos, have you had your flu vaccine, have you had your oxygen saturations measured. Lots of these things can also be delivered remotely, and myCOPD connects into a variety of medical devices, Bluetooth barometers, etc., enabling a completely remote management of patients with this condition. Personalized education is delivered through really high quality videos. We want to give people a Netflix kind of experience when they're going through our educational series. They don't want to see a boring slide set. They want to see something that's really engaging and interactive and something they can share with their family and friends. So inside myCOPD, there's a complete 6-week pulmonary rehabilitation course. It takes them through a graduated exercise program. This has been specifically designed for patients to be delivered inside their single rooms. They don't need any specific equipment to complete this. And during the rest periods, we use those rest periods for delivering further education about how to recover your breathlessness, etc. We have individualized inhaler demonstration as well for every single device on the market. And we also do a medication assessment as well. So either on the clinical side or on the patient side, patients input their medication and we give them a guide about whether the medication they're currently taking matches their exact requirements, conforms to international and national regulations, or it also looks for medical pharmaceutical interactions as well, because lots of systems don't do that, and you still see lots of patients that are on 2 of the same drugs. So we're still having patients who are on Symbicort and Seretide, for example, and those aren't picked up by conventional pharmacy systems at the moment. And we deliver self-management at an individual level. So when patients log in each day, they log in their symptoms, we direct them to the appropriate part of their self-management plan so they know what to take, what medications to take, and whether they need to access their health service. And these self-management plans can be customized by individual clinical teams as well to give individual clinical advice about how they should access appropriate services. So during the pandemic, we've seen an exponential rise in patient use and clinician use as well. There's been widespread acceptability of the platform. We've now had 25,000 new patients that have been recruited during the year 2020. And just to give you an idea of the amount that myCOPD has been used during the last year, we delivered almost 250,000 educational sessions to individual patients and over 54,000 pulmonary rehabilitation sessions. If you try to deliver that in a conventional way, the cost would be astronomical. But what we're doing here is delivering things in a different way. It's very personalized and very affordable, and that can be delivered at a population level. And often, COPD is one of the hardest patient demographics to reach. These are patients that are normally deprived, they're normally elderly, but what we found is that age is not a barrier, and it hasn't been a barrier for several years. The average age of patients using the myCOPD platform is 66.8. And what we find is if we send an email to activate their registration, even without any clinical interaction, we get more than 50% of people onboarding onto the apps and using them on a regular basis. But the great thing about having a connected system like this is that the data sets that you're getting from this system are like no other. So we can understand the phenotype of the patients that are using the application. We can analyze the data that's coming in on a daily basis. And in the last 12 months, we've captured 11,000 exacerbation events, almost 250,000 symptom scores. And patients love using medication diaries. So if this is one thing we can learn for as clinicians, as device manufacturers, and in the pharmaceutical industry, that using applications like this, patients really love something that ends in the word diary. So if it's an activity diary, a peak flow diary, or a medication diary, patients feel quite compelled to complete this. So we've got more than 500,000 medication diary entries during the last 12 months. We've been working closely with universities, the pharmaceutical industry on a big grant called Horizon 2020 Big Medalytics Grant. And this was having a look at, can we do exacerbation prediction modeling based on the data that we're receiving? And early indications are, and this is a paper that's being submitted at the moment for publication, is that we're able to identify patients really accurately who may be exacerbating within the next 3 days to an 80% confidence margin. We hope to refine that better because we've got more patients joining the platform. The platform's now being used to recruit people into clinical studies. We can now deliver a live phase 4 real-world evidence studies through the platform as well. So if we've got a new drug that's about to enter into one of our markets, we can monitor the impact of that drug in real time. And we can do trials, virtual trials on the data set as well. So we'd like to explore any hypothesis, and that because the data set is so large now, we can do that from a remote location. Please follow us on Twitter, visit our website, which is mHealth.com. You can find more information about myCOPD and the clinical trials behind that. And that's the end of my presentation.